Just to sort of kick things off, thank you everyone for joining us. It's really, really good. And basically this webinar is going to be about the art of crafting a successful campaign. I'm Inez and I am talent strategist at The Work Crowd. We are a network of global freelancers that cover the PR, comms and marketing mix. And we have this brilliant platform that connects clients with the talent that they need when they need it. So it's fantastic. Alongside this, I am also co-chair of the PRCA NextGen group. I do understand that this webinar has been it's been open to people from all different areas, from the Work Crowd area, Hanson Search, PRCA, and LinkedIn in general. So if you do not know what the PRCA NextGen group is, it is a national group that provides support and advice for practicing PR and comms professionals. And then the NextGen aspect is just for the PRs that are in the first 10 years of their career. Within this role as co-chair, we do host a lot of events, be it in person or as a webinar just like this. So if you do want to find out a wee bit more, do just let me know, message me after this and I can tell you all about it. As it's just a perfect way to upskill and sort of create a community vibe. I'm delighted to be joined here next to me with Maria Jordan. It's fantastic to be able to do this in person, as lots of things still aren't quite there yet. She is a global PR specialist and also the founder of Fireflies Management, a freelance PR agency. And she is a PR expert with 10 whole years plus of PR experience and has worked across technology, AI, lifestyle, beauty, etc. Just so many different things. So she's really a whole wealth of knowledge, basically. And she's worked with clients such as Oppo, Lamborghini, Wimbledon, and MyHeritage, which we will be discussing later on. Maria has also generously offered those who've signed up for this webinar a very useful tip sheet. It's actually titled Unleash Your PR Pro Brilliance, Essential Hacks for Freelance PRs. So I've had a look at it, it's really, really interesting, and it's a really great example of adding value, which is something that you do mention inside of it, so that's great. I've actually had the pleasure of knowing Maria for quite a while now, and she's a freelancer on The Work Crowd, and also she's attended some of our PRCA events, which has been a really, really great sort of get to know you and see the campaigns that you've been working on. But as mentioned, we will be discussing the power of impactful communications to create change globally. And more specifically, we will be honing in on the art of creating a successful campaign. But first, I will let Maria introduce herself. Do feel free to ask questions in the question box. I think it's a wee bit difficult if you write them in the comments, but either way, we'll come back to them. We have 5 to 10 minutes at the end, so we can make sure that we do get around to them and cover anything that you might want to know. But on you go, introduce yourself.
Wow, thank you so much for having me, for the brilliant introduction that you gave. I am so honored to be here, and I'm going to touch on how I started my career and then what led me to freelance and how I started my career in freelance. So I actually started in events, and I was marketing a lot of events, like 15 years ago. And from there, I was hired by a huge hospitality group in Shoreditch because they were launching different concepts, bars and restaurants. And they hired me to basically launch their whole brand and launch those really cool concepts with cocktail and art sort of merging into one.
And is this something that was new to you at the time?
Oh, completely new. It was I just loved speaking with people. I loved communicating and creating a community. I never studied communications or PR, but I would say I had very good people skills.
Yeah, they trusted you with that. So
and they did, yes, I must have done something right. And that really helped me to sort of break into the industry a little bit more. And one of my very good friends who I went to university with, I think saw that potential. He was working at a company and then introduced me to them. So I was there for about 2 years. And then from that, I was also approached by a huge restaurant chain. They saw what I had done and they thought, well, we want this because we're launching a couple of different restaurants. So I ended up doing the PR for them. So in hospitality and doing that part of the world, I was there for about 3 years. Okay. And I thought, well, I know everything there is to know about hospitality. So let me try a completely different industry. And what do I decide to do? I go into tech, which is a completely different industry. And luckily, I was the PR manager for a luxury accessory phone brand. Okay. And within a couple of I think months, in a couple of months, they promoted me to global PR. And what was really interesting about that role is I was in charge of 5 different markets. So I was working on the UK, the US, the Nordics, Germany, and Australia, New Zealand.
Oh my gosh.
And what was incredibly fascinating and really helpful to sort of build my experience was that I was able to create a global strategy from sort of the head office. And then I would work with my local PR agencies to localize it for a different market. And I was quite surprised because I thought a campaign that would work really well in the UK would also work really well in the US because it's an English-speaking market.
Yeah.
But actually it doesn't. So the audience in the US and the audience in the UK is so, so different. And I was really able to work with the agencies to localize each of those campaigns.
What are some that you saw?
It's just how people perceive information. So in the UK, we love sarcasm.
Yeah.
We can be quite cheeky about messaging, about campaigns. In the US, they like things to be a little bit more straight to the point, especially if you're promoting a phone case. It's like, come on, it's a phone case. Like, you know, just be more like straight to the point about it. So that was incredibly interesting. And it was just being really creative because a phone case is a phone case. So how do you make that sexy?
How do you tell the story on a phone case?
Exactly.
Definitely.
So it was a challenge, but it was also a really good way to understand how PRs work.
Definitely.
Because within that, I was able to tap into the tech, to the consumer tech media who really want to know about the materials and how does this work. And for the lifestyle media, they were more interested in, this is a great accessory.
Yeah.
How does it complement my outfit? So I was sort of tapping into different media outlets and really crafting different messages for those different pillars. So that was incredibly interesting.
So you mentioned briefly, sorry,
Sure.
about how you worked with local agencies to sort of be able to market it and PR it as much as well as you could for the areas. Is that like basically how you did it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And then how within that, how did you develop your personal brand doing such a range of different things going from hospitality to tech? How did you
Do you know what? Back then, I was just doing what I was doing and I was just posting on LinkedIn. There was no strategy behind it. There was no thought process behind it. I would go on LinkedIn every time we had a really good coverage that we had just secured. I would just go and share it. There was no strategy. But ultimately, because I was working in so many different industries and I was meeting so many different people, I was connecting with them and I was sort of building my little mini community just through doing that and then just posting like without any sort of strategy. I would say my personal brand evolved a lot more when I went freelance.
Yeah.
That's when it kind of like, wow, I now understand the value of it and what it actually does.
Is it because you could choose the sort of industries you were working with, or do you still like working for the complete range and just having yourself put into
both?
Yeah.
I'd say both. Cool. Yeah. So even from that, I was then approached by a mobile phone brand, and they really liked what I had been sharing, my content. They saw my years of experience on LinkedIn because it's your online portfolio, right? And with them, I was working for 2 years to launch this new brand into the UK because they were incredibly popular in Asia, but nobody really knew them in the UK. So that really helped me really come out of my comfort zone because it's a new brand, it's a new concept. Yes, I have the contacts and the experience, but it was a completely different ballgame because we were working with Wimbledon and so many different partnerships and Lamborghini that it really just blew, like everything just grew so much from that. And from that experience, I was able to then share more things onto LinkedIn. Yeah. And again, it kind of grew my presence a lot more.
Definitely. And then, so you became freelance, and then since then you've opened your own agency, haven't you?
I did. Yeah. So that was a crazy experience because while I was working with the company that I had just mentioned, a week before lockdown in the UK, I thought, well, I've been here for 2 years. Again, I've been in tech for a little bit. I've done hospitality. I've done a bit of lifestyle. I thought, well, I want something new. I want a new challenge. Yeah. And a week before we went into lockdown, I handed in my notice. And I know.
Great timing, of course.
It was exactly. It was the best timing because I took some time out to really figure out what I wanted to do. And then
Because you're quite a traveller, aren't you?
I am,
Yeah,
exactly.
so I suppose in COVID we're all sort of locked in a bit.
I just travelled. I didn't have any plans. I just booked a couple of destinations and went exploring. And I think sometimes you need that as well.
Yes.
I think for anyone that wants to do freelance, it's good to sort of leave the corporate world for a little bit. And then if you can, have a little bit of time to like really figure out what you want to do and what that next step looks like. Because the reason I never wanted to do freelance is because I was always in-house. I was always really comfortable. It didn't seem scary. It didn't seem like I was pushing myself to do it. But as soon as you step out and if you can, afford it, it's probably my number one advice, just to kind of give yourself a little bit of a break.
I think in the previous conversation that we had, you definitely mentioned have as many experiences as you can. It really helps you sort of find yourself a bit.
It really does, because then you really realize what you're passionate about. Because now I'm so passionate about what I do that I can do it at 12 o'clock at night. I've worked at 4 a.m. and I'm still like, this is amazing. I'm buzzing because I'm genuinely enjoying what I do. So I think as cliche as it sounds, you really have to find what you're passionate about and really focus on that. And being a freelancer, there's so much flexibility as well. Because there will be times when you can take a week off or work an extra week. So you always have that balance, and you just have to find out what works for you. So I remember just coming back from a trip, and I thought, why don't I just start? Like, what do I have to lose? And the first website, this is why I feel like this is a whole 360 coming back. The first website I visited was the PRCA.
Brilliant.
Because I had no idea how to be a
navigate
freelancer.
that.
I had the knowledge of how to do PR, but not how to manage an agency or anything like that. And then I remember being on there, Googling and searching, and the Work Crowd was the first website that I came across.
Fantastic.
And this is not a sales page, it is genuinely what happened. I think you can even find...
I didn't pay her to say it.
I think you can even find LinkedIn posts where I've actually spoken about this. And I spoke to the team. I was, within 2 days, I believe, I was matched with a client, MyHeritage. And I had a call with Rafi, who was the PR back then. And he literally just hired me on the spot, and we just started working.
Brilliant.
And from there, again, I didn't have a website. I don't even think I had a professional email address, because I just wanted to start. And it just happened so quickly, thankfully, to the workaround, but it just happened so quickly. I thought, well, let me just sort out a media database. Let me sort out whatever needs to be done for me to be able to actually secure coverage. And then everything else will come later. And I think that really helped.
Brilliant.
Because had I been worrying about my brand kit, my logo, my company, and creating a brand profile rather than my personal profile, I don't think it would have worked as well as it did.
That's so, and like as you are experiencing everything, you are developing your personal brand completely, and you're meeting all these people and getting this network that also must be so beneficial to that. Definitely.
Exactly. And I feel like, as we were mentioning earlier as well, I think people buy into the person rather than the brand.
Absolutely.
So you really have to just work, and I think we'll probably go into the steps of how to create a personal brand, but I think you really have to think about what is different about you, what is it about you that makes you unique, and really focus on that, because people will start noticing.
Definitely.
And people will naturally come to you for that particular
we
advice.
were obviously talking about ChatGPT, as everyone is these days, and we were saying that it does just sound the same often, and it doesn't sound like I would sound at all. It doesn't sound as sarcastic as the UK is, and you sort of need to have your individuality into it and
100%.
your experiences for sure.
I think with ChatGPT, especially for freelancers, what it's really good for is brainstorming. So sometimes, as you're working on your own and you have to come up with a creative idea or a pitch, sometimes it's quite hard. I'm an introvert when it comes to my work, but an extrovert when it comes to brainstorming, right? So for me, sometimes it's quite hard to come up with an idea just out of the blue. So I would use ChatGPT to go and have a look at some ideas, and then go back to the client, and then we'll sort of brainstorm some of those ideas together. So I think for that it works.
Definitely.
When it comes to messaging, that really has to come from you.
Yeah, definitely.
It's so 100%. Important, because that your tone of voice is what makes you different.
Definitely. Couldn't agree more. So leading basically on to what this whole webinar is going to be about, you briefly mentioned MyHeritage. That's sort of what we're going to focus on, I think, today.
Sure.
It's absolutely fantastic. Do you want to basically give a brief sort of description on it and give some of your insights, and then we can sort of delve in further to it?
Sure. Just as a bit of background, MyHeritage is they provide DNA kits to audience worldwide. They have 6 billion historical records. They are also a tech company. They've launched many incredible tech out there, AI, etc. But for this particular story that we're focusing on today, it's about an initiative they are running with a non-profit organization in Chile called Nos Buscamos. So in the 70s, way back when, the Chilean government was involved in stealing babies from poor families. And we think there's around 50,000 babies that were stolen at birth.
It's shocking.
It's shocking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it happens everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now MyHeritage is helping in multiple countries and multiple organizations.
Yeah.
But right now the focus is on Chile. So with that, they have donated X amount of DNA kits to this nonprofit. And we are constantly being inundated with stories that are coming out from a child that was told that their parents were poor,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to give them up for an adoption. They were adopted by an American family, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Case closed. Because of the work that MyHeritage has been doing to raise awareness, a lot of those stories are now being revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And earlier this year, we worked with an incredible guy called Scott. He had seen a Good Morning America show that one of our users was on, and he thought, wait a minute, I was adopted
Mm-hmm.
from Chile. Could this be me? Could I be stolen? And he reached out to the Nos Buscamos organization. Within, I think, a couple of hours, he was confirmed on the register that he was one of the stolen babies. DNA.
It's incredible that they can sort of move that fast, and that they'll be doing it not for profit. They'll be giving these DNA kits for free.
Exactly. So within the DNA kit, they actually confirmed who his biological family was.
Mm-hmm.
And he was flying out to Chile to basically meet them. So with his incredible story, I was able to secure coverage with the USA Today. And this coverage went out. It did incredibly well. Scott reunited with his family. It was a really, incredibly sad story, but an incredible finish. Such as,
that's what this whole sort of webinar is about, what can come from this PR.
Yeah.
And it's life-changing. It's completely life-changing.
It really is. And then leading to that, there's another guy called Jimmy who for 11 years has also been searching for his adoptive parents. He has some documents, but everything was very contradicting.
Yeah.
And his wife came across the USA Today article and forwarded it to him and thought, well, could you be one of them? And what happened was that he was, and not only that, Scott and Jimmy were related.
Oh my God.
and that
that's absolutely, imagine finding someone that you are related to that you never even really
had no idea.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And also who's had the exact same situation as you. It's completely shocking.
It's shocking. And with Jimmy's story, because Jimmy is a solicitor in the US and he really wanted to make noise.
Yeah.
He was so determined about making noise and just really sharing his story, because he had seen what had happened with Scott's story. Because of Scott, he was able to learn the truth. So he was so determined. And I remember having a conversation with MyHeritage of how can we make this story so powerful?
Yeah, definitely.
And luckily for us, location as well with PR is so important, and so is timing. Jimmy was located in Washington, D.C. So I looked at who's in Washington, D.C., who can actually interview him face to face and really spread this story as far and wide as possible. And very quickly we realized that would be AP, which is Associated Press, and they're the largest news agency in the world.
Okay, wow.
So they ended up interviewing him within 48 hours because he was flying over to Chile to meet his biological mother. The article went live, and I think within 72 hours, 1,500 articles were syndicated across the world.
That's really...
it's just insane. And
it really is such a powerful story, but on top of that, it's something that can just sort of keep rolling and getting bigger and bigger, snowball on.
Exactly, and it went completely viral to the point that it actually put on so much pressure onto the Chilean. Now they have finally decided to acknowledge
Yeah.
this that had happened. Talk about it. It's just showing that a PR story, a positive PR story, a true PR story, not fake news, can have such a positive effect, not just onto people, but onto changing laws and government decisions 100%. And overturning certain decisions. So I think that for me was probably the career highlight, because it's such a big story, but also it's like what came after it, and people again approached MyHeritage and Los Camos to see if they're part of this, and now they're helping thousands.
Yeah, but I mean, it's something that we again talked about earlier on, is that you said it was different to, like, you crafted this in a different way than you do other situations, because you mentioned there was three different aspects when you're looking at a story and how you're going to sort of promote it. But this one, because it's continuous, you have to have a sort of different angle. Do you want to explain that a wee bit more?
Yeah, so I like to think with PR, there's like sort of two, there's multiple things you can do, but sometimes a client would hire you to come up with a campaign. So they might have a product that they're launching, and they kind of want to keep the momentum going, right? So for that, I would usually do like a 3-phase campaign, where it would be a warm-up phase, a launch phase, a sustain phase. The warm-up phase might be you're doing an embargo press briefing, and you're showing the media, like select media, you're showing them the product, you're getting them to experience the product, you're getting them to sample it, you're getting them to write their articles. So when launch happens, those articles are ready to go, people are ready to see them. At the launch phase, you also might have a virtual event or physical event or some kind of an activity where you're either engaging with media or your consumer. And then the sustain phase, which is the interesting one, is how do we keep the momentum going? What stories can we tell that would resonate with people? And how can we keep this product or story interesting? So it might be, you might have a tech pillar that you want to focus on, you might have a lifestyle pillar. It depends on what your product is. So it's just thinking about all of those different phases and what sort of messaging you want to communicate during those different phases. Now, with MyHeritage story, we had multiple stories that we had been working on for 2 years, and each story will have a follow-up story because something would have happened, or a user might have read it and something would have happened from there. So I think with that, you really have to just focus on who is the person that's telling the story, what is the message, where are they based, and how big is the story, and who is the best media, the best journalist that can communicate that story in the most effective way. And
that's, I think, the difficulty sometimes. How do you go about identifying who would be the best places? Where would be the best places to go? Yeah, it depends. That's such a hard question.
No, it's a really fair question, and it's one that comes up all the time. It really just depends on the story, what the story is about, and who would be the best person. With such a sensitive human interest story that has the potential of going viral, I always say that working with a news agency like PA or AP is your best bet, because they actually have the contract with every outlet under the sun. But if you want something more personal, you can also look at regional press. It just depends on the sort of level of visibility and awareness that you want. I think with Jimmy's story, he was very adamant about going global.
I mean, for it to actually happen to you, it would be shocking. And as you said, you're going to want to make waves and make things happen from it.
Absolutely. And I think last year we were working on a story in Canada, a different type of story, but the girls wanted a very localized approach and a very regional approach. So we approached all the local stations, all the news channels. And then what happened, actually, because it's Canada, it's syndicated to every single part in Canada.
Oh, wow.
So then it became an international story or a national story. So it just depends. I think always thinking local and who's around your particular area and who you can pitch, because local media want local stories. They are always craving local stories, especially if they are positive.
Definitely.
It makes it quite easy to.
That makes a lot of sense. So again, with crafting this whole MyHeritage story, I think that if I had this in front of me, I would be so intimidated. It is such an intimidating sort of thing that this is so important to people's lives, as we've mentioned. How did you first tackle it? Like, you knew that this was going to be something that is continuous, and so you said you went to the main sort of news agencies.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm incredibly lucky to have a very good relationship with my client Sarah, who I think might be on the live. Hi Sarah. She is just brilliant at communicating how she wants the story
Okay,
told.
brilliant. So you need good relationships.
We do, and it's a collaborative work.
Yeah.
So I would write the page and then she will go and make suggestions, and it will be a very collaborative approach. And I think that was really important for me when I started freelance.
Yeah.
It's working with clients that I genuinely like, and working with clients that have a good story, that have a positive story, and they also want to make a positive change.
Definitely.
Because I think there's so much going on in the world, especially with AI, that can be quite negative and maybe
also,
doesn't have
a bit
the best,
lonely.
exactly, and not even have the best impact for humans.
Yeah.
So I think for me it was really important to work with the best possible clients, and Sarah is that.
Brilliant.
So for her it was very collaborative, but she also trusts me to be able to pitch the story to the right level of media. So I just thought, well, we're in Washington, it's a great piece, let's go for the biggest publication in Washington, offer them the exclusive, give them a very short time to come back to us, which puts a little bit of pressure on them. Sometimes it backfires, but give them a little bit of like pressure on the time. And I mean, we were literally against time because he was flying out in 2 days. So we didn't have time anyway. So that kind of worked in our favor.
That is quite good. So everything, so the stars aligned. So.
Exactly. So I think collaborating with your clients, making sure that you're aligned, and then being very selective with who you pitch it to. And if it's a big enough outlet, pitch it as an exclusive because they will most likely pick it up and give it a really good tip. And give it a really good treatment as well because they've got the first dips on the story. So they will take extra care of the story. And
other than that, were there any sort of challenges that you did come across? I presume not that it would be quite a plain sailing situation, but because it is so shocking and it snowballs, maybe there were less challenges than usual, but I'm sure you still came across some. Timing was the one. I think Jimmy was even waiting for his passport to come. His passport came in the morning of his flight. So we were worried because we even had TV crew in Chile ready to film the reunion. Oh my God,
so we were thinking, what if it doesn't happen? What if he doesn't fly? Because the story really did depend on him having that first warm embrace with his biological mother, which was really special and what drove the story. So I think with stories like that, it's content as well. You've got to have the photos, the videos, because they create the story in itself.
That's the buzz. That's the things that's going to be sent around.
Exactly.
TikTok or Instagram, wherever.
Exactly. And it did go viral on social media as well. But having some photos to then even interest media enough to cover the story helps as well. So I think timing, location, and content is really important.
And then, so obviously, this was a really high-profile campaign. Thinking about the smaller ones, is there, other than the more localized ones, when you're crafting that initially, is there anything you need to start thinking about? Like, how do you sort of understand the places that you're going to need to focus on and get to grips with how things work there?
I think that's a really great question. And it does go back to what is it that you're promoting. If it's a product, because that would need 3 months at least of communication to get the brand awareness out. If it's a story, then again, making sure that you've got all your ducks in a row. Making sure that everything is clear, that you know what you're doing, you know what your messaging is, who you're pitching to, the kind of expectations the client has as well. So it does really depend on the actual brief that you get. I'm very clear with my clients that I need a brief because sometimes they're like, oh, just do it. Oh, you know what you're doing. And I'm like, no. I need you to tell me what is the story? Who is it about? Do we have photos? Do we have videos?
You to really, but also add their sort of personal spin to it as well as your own sort of branding.
And then we usually now have conversations with the product team or like say, for example, clients launching a product. I want to speak to the product team, to the tech team. I want to understand everything there is about this particular product because if you're pitching to consumer tech media, for sure they know more than I do. They're the experts and they will ask me questions for sure that I don't know. So I really want to get under the skin of 100%. Every product or every story. So I think a lot of research is involved. And then also the research of who is the right media. Because, for example, if you've got such a sensitive story, you may not want to pitch it to the man online because the type of audience that are reading the mail online won't be so positive. They might be quite negative. So also doing your research into the right audience, the right media, where that story would sit, what that would look like.
I think that's a really, really fantastic point. When I first started in this job, I probably didn't understand PR as much as I could have, but then from doing all these sort of networking events, I've really met so many fantastic PR professionals, and feel like I kind of understand it a lot better now. But it is all about everyone's an expert in what they do. You need to go to these people, find out everything that they know about the project, so you can, or like whatever it is, your story, so that you can campaign it well. And I think it's really, really important to sort of trust who you're working with, as you said, and then hopefully it'll work out.
Collaboration. It's so important. Collaborating with your client, but also with media, keeping in touch with media, letting them know, hey, I've got this new client. Are you working on anything relevant right now that can contribute to? Because interviews as well for your client is a really great way for them to communicate their message, for them to talk about what they're doing. That thought leadership is so important as well. So it kind of works both ways. Because the more you know, the more you'll be able to offer support.
As I said, we have got a tip sheet that's going to be sent around later on. It's really, really fascinating, and I think it really will help people who are sort of moving into the PR world and wanting some more advice. But also, I think you said feel free to reach out to you and people at the PRCA or the work crowd if you do have any support or have any questions at all. Then that's obviously an absolutely incredible story. That's fantastic, and I bet you just love working on it continuously and seeing how it sort of develops, because as we said, it's constantly developing. But thinking about who the audience are for us right now, let's talk about what sort of tips you can give to them. Some of the people that are going to be in our audience are going to be right at the start of their career, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who could also deal with some of these tips as well. Do you have anything that could sort of help them with just getting to grips with the PR world, PR and comms? We've talked briefly about we talked podcasts, and I think it was the Diary of the CEO, that sort of thing. And then also we talked about Slack and mental health, if you want to go into that just a wee bit more.
Sure, thank you so much. I would love to. So one thing I would definitely say that's probably really important is your personal brand. We touched on it earlier today. And the way I sort of built my personal brand and what really helped me is following these few steps. So one of them is thinking about your story and what your message is. So who are you? Did you work somewhere when you got fired and you were told that you weren't good enough, and then you kind of rose from the ashes and you did something really good? That's your story, and that's what makes you really unique. That's your message. That's what you can lead with, right? So thinking about your story, what makes you unique to yourself, and then thinking about, well, what's also different about me? And what's also different is your tone of voice. So with your posts, do you want to be authentic? Do you want to be honest? Do you want to be funny? Do you want to be sarcastic? What is the tone of voice that you feel most comfortable with, and something that you can continue to improve on and craft as time goes on? That's what makes you different. I know it's such a cliche word, but it's really important to just distinguish what makes you different from others. And then thinking about your platform. So where are your audience? If you want to attract influencers because you want to do PR for influencers, they're probably not going to be on LinkedIn. Their parents might be, but they won't be. They might be on TikTok. So you can create a TikTok account and then create your personal brand on there and create videos. Or if you want to approach more corporate brands, then probably LinkedIn is your best bet. So think about your platforms and where your audience is sitting. And then consistency. I know it's cliche, but consistency doesn't mean doing 100% every day. One day you can do 1%, and next day you can do 5.
Other days you can be up to 4, like you said.
Exactly.
As long as you enjoy it also.
Exactly. And I remember ages ago, I was listening to a LinkedIn Live, and one of the presenters gave a really good tip, and it was like the 999 rule on LinkedIn. Spend 9 minutes a day engaging with 9 different people on 9 different posts. And 9 minutes is not a lot.
No.
In 24 hours that we have, 9 minutes is really not that much. But sometimes I will do 30 minutes. Sometimes I might do 1 minute. But it's about showing up and just being consistent and just really enjoying what you're doing. Because if you're not enjoying it, it will always come across. And then also look at your analytics. So if you're putting out something that is a sales promotion about you or your work, see how people are engaging. Are they responding? Is there like a conversation going? If not, maybe change the tactic for next time. So always try to learn from what you've posted previously and adapt, because each strategy would never, like, one thing would work one month, it wouldn't work the next month.
Yeah, I think being flexible and adapting is actually just a great thing to get to grips of in everything. Because we were talking also earlier on about how the role of PR and what you do in PR is completely changing as well as time goes by. But
exactly, and just to add on from that, it's about adding value. So it shouldn't always be about, hey, look at what I'm doing, it's so amazing, I've secured X amount of coverage. Sometimes people want to learn because they might not have a budget to hire a freelancer or an agency, and you can say to them, here are 3 quick steps on getting coverage, or here's how you can approach media without paying for a media database. Sometimes it's about adding those little bits of value that will then come back to you. And I think collaboration is really important. And online and offline. So offline collaboration for me would be Slack. I've got an incredible freelance digital community on Slack, and we are very engaged. We talk to each other every single day, and you almost don't feel like you're alone, because
so I guess Slack's like a social media, I guess.
Yeah, it's a platform.
It's
It's like WhatsApp, but you kind of have platforms within Slack. And we've got a couple of different channels on there. One will be about opportunities. So if anyone's seen a job that they think is good fit for the group, they'll share it. If people want to talk about mental health, there's a channel for that. If people want to talk about general things, there's a channel for that. So I think it's just about opening the conversation and
going to these events like the ones we do at the PRCA. I think getting out there, speaking to different people.
Totally.
I felt like the networking event that we did, we held it with the independent consultants and the NextGen. So these are people who are in total different points in their lives within this industry. And it was fascinating hearing someone who's just into it with 3 years experience, speaking to someone who's, as we were saying, 20 years of being a freelancer. It's fascinating. And there's so many ways that we can upskill each other and have this community that we can build. And it's just fantastic. It's lovely.
Exactly. And I think it's about collaborating offline with the event, with your own social media platforms, and then collaborating online as well. So when you are, for example, thanks to the Slack group, I was able to hire 2 freelancers to help me with different projects that I was working on this month. And, once the coverage comes out, I'll be sharing on my LinkedIn, they'll be sharing it on theirs, which means my profile will also be engaging with their audience and vice versa. So collaboration is also really important, especially when it comes to building your personal brand and starting a freelance.
Definitely.
Because it can feel quite a lonely
it's all remote and all doing it individually, definitely. Okay, so I think we can maybe move on to questions now. Unfortunately, we've not been having them come up to us. So I think if I can just go on to our LinkedIn, we can potentially find some through there.
Amazing. Well, guys, I hope you're finding this useful. And if you do have any questions, or if there's something that you're working on and you need some tips or suggestions on how to tackle that, please feel free to reach out and let me know what you think.
So we've got 11 questions or 11 comments. So good that you're all interested. This is a question from Maria. When you are working on an international campaign, do you have to alter your press release for different markets? And did you use other PRs in other countries to get more media exposure in different geographies? I can maybe.
That's a great question. So I think a press release is quite a formal announcement. So I think that should probably remain the same for each country, especially if you're using something like PR Newswire or Business Wire, where it's a PR press release distribution service and it goes onto the wire and then that is syndicated globally. I think for press release, it's important to definitely have one. However, saying that, for each country, if you are localizing it and if you have support, it's important for that media pitch to be localized to that particular country, because you can then create some data, you can bring in some experts and local experts that will make it relevant to their market. So keep the press release as it is for all countries, but when you're doing your own outreach, localize the media pitch, not the press release, to make it more relevant.
Brilliant.
And offer some local insights as well, if you can.
Fantastic. And we've got another one. Key point you just said there, the assumption of what works in one market would by default work in another. It doesn't yield favourable results. I've experienced the same between the different Middle Eastern markets. A lot of people assume that what works in UAE, Qatar, would automatically work in Saudi, which is so wrong. And do you have quite a bit of experience working in these markets? Or?
Yeah. So you're completely spot on, and I think it's a really fair point, and it just goes back to localizing content for your own market. So one great way to do that is through data. If there is enough budget to do a local survey, I mean, it depends on what your topic is, but to do like a local survey where you can get insights from the locals, or hiring an expert in that particular field. So if it's about health, hiring a health expert, getting their take on to the particular announcement that you're sharing. Because not only would that add more credibility, it would also make the media feel a little bit more special, because you're kind of boosting their egos a little bit. You're like, hey, I've done a bit of research into what works into your market. So each market is so different. Honestly, I was so shocked, because having managed the US, the UK, and Australia, all speaking markets, so different. And you really can't take one approach fits all. So localizing it as much, and then also looking at your competitors, and then seeing how media are speaking about your competitors in those markets, and who's speaking about them, because ultimately that will help you with your media list.
Definitely.
It's a bit of a cheap way to do it, but hey, we're all trying to get results at the end of the day.
Perfect. Okay, right, next one. How does she amplify the coverage through social?
That's a great question. So I don't look after social media for clients, because I feel like that's just a completely different world in itself. But one way that clients, and that's a really good point. One way that in terms of my personal brand, is I created a story of the Jimmy story that we had with the stolen babies, because that generated so much coverage on both broadcast and online and print. I decided to just create an actual video for social media. So what I did with that,
it's on her LinkedIn if you do want to go.
Oh, did you like it?
It's amazing.
Amazing, thank you. So there you go, you've seen it.
Yeah.
And to be honest, actually through that video, I had so many different inquiries coming through.
Fantastic.
And then my client liked it so much that they asked me to create a video for them and for their platforms. So I think video, I mean, it's a little bit of a standard response, but videos tend to perform really well right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if you're trying to convey a story that it has a bit of an emotion to it. And then that works really well on social media, especially with PR coverage, because if you're only getting online coverage, there's no one really talking about it. You know, you don't have a TV presenter talking about the story. So having somebody to kind of introduce you to the story, like an actual face.
And you're so familiar with it, so
exactly, it just adds a human element to it a little bit more.
Definitely.
And then you can post that onto your social medias and make that more engaging.
That's really true, actually, and it is a fantastic video.
Thank you. I designed it myself. I was very proud. I only took the weekend.
Actually, we did discuss earlier about like getting out of your comfort zone. You need to do that. You need to have these different experiences to see what works and what doesn't work. And in that case, that obviously worked very well for you. And I think a final question, as we're almost at the end of our time. What has the impact of the campaign been for MyHeritage? As a company. So
the impact has been huge for many different reasons. One, obviously, they've got loads of links to their website. They're part of an amazing project where they're actually helping a non-profit organization, but also helping users with DNA kits, etc. I think for them, it's just important to keep that momentum going and to continue to help people. So I think for them, and it's probably a question for Sarah or MyHeritage, but I think for them it's great to be part of the story, I think. And definitely. To raise more awareness. And it's a non-profit. You know, they're donating to kids for free.
And it's also just an interesting thing to do, is to have this DNA kit and then sort of see where everything lies. Yeah, and just like make people aware that you can do this sort of thing is quite a cool aspect for sure.
It really is. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
If you have any more questions, feel free to email them in, comment them below. We can get back to you some way. There will be a recording of this on YouTube, on the Work Crowd, and I think potentially on the PRCA. But thank you so much for joining us, you guys and Maria. It's been fascinating. It's been lovely. And it was great.
Thank you so much.
All.